everyone. I would like to welcome you to our next series, which is a talk by Shelly Bortolotto, who is a full-time life coach here in Canada. She is also in British Columbia, but she is in Whistler. She's a full-time life coach who's fascinated by how our thoughts create our results and our realities. She works with her clients to teach them how to manage their brains so that they feel better and accomplish big things. When you work with her and when she's coaching you, you'll hear her lovely Aussie accent. And when she's not coaching, she's out exploring the mountains of Whistler with her husband and her daughter. Shelly honed her coaching skills through certifying at the Life Coach School, and her coaching skill, along with her incredible ability to hold space, creates a coaching experience for her clients that has a profound, lasting impact on everybody she works with. Shelly, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. So, we'd love to hear more about the kinds of goals that you have for your business, first off, and what kind of people you enjoy working with before we launch into talking about bias today.
Of course. Thank you for having me on, Jody. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Notable Communications. What I do is I'm a life coach, as you said, and the reason I'm a life coach is because I love seeing people have that understanding of it's actually what's they're thinking in their brain is what is ending up creating the result they have in their life, whether it's a result they love, a result they don't love, or somewhere in the middle.
And I think that's the beauty of what you do is you're such a bubbly person, and I just love speaking to you. And I'd like to thank you for being a part of this initiative and for just being so willing to participate and just speak about a really important topic, breaking your bias. And for this talk, Shelly is going to talk about breaking our own internal bias. She has prepared a presentation for us. But before she launches into that, I just want to bring her attention to what's behind me on screen. So this is every Wednesday we have a word of the day. And in celebration of this month of International Women's Day, I just wanted to define the term bias so that we are all on board for that. So bias is a tendency to lean toward a certain circumscribed viewpoint or assumption, a judgment that is not based on facts, and prejudice towards something or someone. So just keep that in mind as we speak today and as Shelly moves through her presentation, and afterwards when we just discuss questions around her presentation as well. That's something that we should bear in mind. And of course, it's the theme of International Women's Day. It's the theme of International Women's Month, breaking those biases. And now Shelly is going to lead us through a talk on breaking our own internal biases. So Shelly, I'm going to make you a host and then it is over to you.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Jody. And as you make me a host, I'm going to bring everyone's attention to that key little phrase there, a judgment not based on facts. And we'll come back to that one throughout the presentation. Just going to pop over and share my screen. Bring up my lovely little Canva I've done. I promise it is fun and easy to look at. There we go. Jody, I'll just get you to give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation properly. Might just exit out and start it over again, actually. Make sure we're on the right presentation. There we are. So, my name is Shelly Bortolotto. I'm a general life coach. And today I want to talk you through how you can break your own bias. Now, Jody just explained bias to us as something that is a way we interpret things or a way people interpret things that has no basis in fact. It's not controllable. It's not provable. It's not something that we can prove. And when we see bias as something we can't control, we have no influence over it. But when we reframe bias as something we can influence, we can take our power back. And I'm going to show you how just now. So first, before we take our power back, we actually need to understand how the brain works. And this is something I teach my clients all the time, and a lot of them are just blown away by it. So if this is kind of breaking your brain right now, that's totally okay. So how the brain works is there's a circumstance out in the world, and that circumstance happens and we have no control over it. It might be somebody says some words, it might be an event happens, it might be something happening in our world that we can't actually influence. But here's how we do influence our world, is we have a thought about that. So that might be as simple as this person said some words and I might think, oh, I kind of agree with that, or I don't agree with that. So that thought then creates a feeling in my body. So one thought matches one feeling at a time, even though they happen very fast in our brain. And then from that feeling, that predominant feeling in our body at that moment, is we start to take actions. And those actions are going to prove that thought true, no matter what thought it is. If you're thinking, they said, oh, I'm not a very good leader, and then in your heart, at least part of you agrees with that, then you'll feel inadequate or insufficient, and you'll start taking actions from a place of that inadequacy or insufficiency. And the result is, in my own life, and this happened to me in a corporate job, I show up as less than capable. So here's how that happens. Somebody might say, oh, you're not, and so that's the circumstance. And then we think, oh, they're right, we're not. We feel inadequate. We take actions like we work harder, we try to upskill, we wait for our turn to be qualified, we focus on where we need to get better, and we create the result of I'm not yet qualified. We sit into this place of agreeing with them, agreeing with somebody else's bias, not provable, not necessarily true, and we live into that. So we start to create a reality where we're not good enough, we're not qualified, we feel inadequate, and we take actions like waiting for our turn. Now, they haven't said we need to wait for our turn. They've said, oh, you're not qualified for that. But from our thought about it, they're right, we're not. And our feeling of inadequate, we take the actions of like, oh, well, soon it'll be my turn to be qualified, or soon it'll be my turn to put in for that promotion. So we then create the result of not qualified based on our thought, not exactly on what they said. And I'll give you another example later so you can see it in more detail. So what doesn't happen, and this is the bias part, this is about breaking our own bias. When somebody says, oh, you're not qualified for that, we don't question, well, what is qualified enough? We don't think, well, the last person wasn't either, hello. We see their statement as the truth. They say words, their words have their own bias. We buy into that bias as the truth. And when we agree with them, we act from that truth. Now, this kind of bites us in the bum. Am I allowed to say that? This is an Aussie word. A lot, because we're habitually taught through school, through university, people above us know better. And that doesn't help at all, because when we're thinking people above us know better, we start agreeing with their statements, especially if we're new into an organization, or if we've changed jobs, or if we're new into a company, or we've just, come out of university, got a new job, that sort of thing. Or if for a lot of people listening, you've been conditioned through society to think, oh, somebody else knows better. And that's separate from the systemic biases that I'm going to talk about a little later on.
Shelly, sorry. So I just want to stop you there, not to interrupt your presentation, but just to add to what you've been saying. So this can also apply to somebody who has, for instance, changed career paths, or if they are embarked on a new venture, they've decided to perhaps become an entrepreneur. And somebody says, perhaps, well, you don't have the experience for that. So that qualifier essentially inhibits your growth. And so from what I've understood so far in what you've discussed is that when we internalize a bias, we have the potential to self-sabotage. And so once we internalize that belief or that bias, what ends up happening is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the more we buy into that, the more that influences our behavior. And I know you're going to get more into that now, but would you say that's fair in summary of what you've just discussed?
Yeah, and that's an excellent summary. And a lot of people kind of hear that and they think, oh, yeah, that's fine and dandy. And then when I get into the coaching sessions with people and we look at a specific situation, we take an example in their life and we look at what were you thinking when that person said that? And then what did you do? And they actually see it in real life. You can see the light bulb will go on and they're like, oh my God, I'm doing it to myself. And right now I get to have all the expressions because I'm talking to you, but in my coach client sessions, it's deadpan because because I actively try to not put my own bias on their thoughts. We explore their thoughts and my bias as a coach doesn't come into it. So yes, when people sort of see the thought in their head, we write it down, and I'll show you how to write it down in just a second. And they start to name the feeling that they may have never named of inadequacy or insufficiency or even unwillingness. I see unwillingness come up a lot in certain clients. And they start to see their actions. They're like, yeah, it's happening. And it can be quite confronting to people to see it's not them doing the thing that's causing you to act in this way. It's you agreeing with them. Thank you, Jody, for kind of really highlighting that to the audience. I appreciate you jumping in.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, so this is actually how we write it down to really hone in on it. So we identify a very quite neutral or factual circumstance, and then we identify a thought in our head that we're having at the time. And the thought in this case is they're right, I'm not qualified is actually the thought here. And when you think I'm not qualified, you feel inadequate. The actions you take is you work harder, you try to upskill, you wait, you focus on where you could be better. Essentially, you're seeing all the ways in which you're not. And the result that happens is I create in myself that I'm not yet qualified. Now, had you had a different thought, like if the word said, oh, you're not qualified for that, and you start thinking, well, I'm qualified in 7 of the 8 areas, then you would have a different feeling and you would take different actions from that feeling in the workplace and in your life. And I'm just talking about the workplace in general, but bias comes up everywhere in our life. And so that's how we write it out. We have a circumstance and we write literally on our piece of paper, what thought was I thinking? What feeling was created from that thought? The actions I did, the actions I didn't do, maybe the words I said to others, and also kind of what's going on in my brain. And the result that creates will always match the thought in some way. So let's look at another example as well, just to really hone in on it. So another one people may say to you is, oh, you'll need to be tougher to lead. Now, when your thought from that becomes in response to the circumstance of I'm not tough enough, the feeling I personally have is weak. I feel weak, lacking, inadequate. So when I feel weak, I overthink my words. I notice my imperfections. Maybe I try harder to be perfect and I don't stand up for my ideas. You know, I don't say, hey, I actually said that first, or hey, they're just saying what I said 10 minutes earlier, or hey, I said that to them in the break room and now they're taking credit for my stuff. Sure, we've all had that one. The result is I start believing and creating evidence for not being tough enough. And I don't even question, well, do I need to be tough to lead? Maybe I need to have great relationship skills, or maybe I need to be excellent at listening to be a good leader. I just start living into this image of not being tough enough. And then my actions get kind of out of whack. So again, people say things out in the world, and it's our thought about that creates the result finally now in our world. So here's some of the unintentional thoughts you have. You might have, I'm new at this. They're more advanced than me. They know better than me. I'm still learning. They know what's needed better than me. I could do better. It's a lot of like the ruminating in your head. And I was telling Jody earlier, just before we started recording, that a lot of these same thoughts came up as I was writing this presentation, like, I could do better. Maybe somebody else has a different opinion, or maybe their opinion is more valid. Like, all the things, these thoughts come up all the time. That doesn't mean that you're lacking or inadequate. It just means you've got a human brain. This happens to everybody. What the skill is here in order to break the bias is to start noticing this as a thought rather than a fact. I'm new at this. Might sound like a fact, but it's actually still pretty like unempowering as a thought. Oh, I'm the new person here. But you might have come from this other wonderful company where you were an amazing employee and an amazing leader. But now you're just choosing this so-called factual thought, which is still creating a feeling in your body. So breaking our own bias starts by asking ourselves, would 100 people agree? So all our thoughts that are happening in our head in response to circumstances, we need to just notice that they are thoughts. So we would ask ourselves, would 100 people agree? So if somebody says, you need to be tougher to lead, would 100 people agree? And usually in client sessions, we're talking about like something that happened in their kitchen or in their bedroom or in their workplace. So I get my clients to imagine 100 people squishing it around, like standing a little bit creepily around their bed, watching them wake up in the morning. Would 100 people agree that you're always getting out of bed late? Would 100 people agree that you need to be tougher to lead? And then once you put that quite comical image in of like 100 people like squished into a small, very small area watching you, it's very easy to see that 100 people would not agree on most of the things we say to ourselves in our heads, because they're opinions about ourselves. And it's the opinions about ourselves that we choose to stick into, to step into the feelings, that creates our world. And it continues when we pause, when we decide, do we want to, even if 100 people do agree or if they don't agree, do we want to take that on as a truth? We can choose our thought. Then we can respond. When we choose our thought, what we're really doing is we're choosing the feeling in our body. And it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of seeing yourself in this loop, this self-completing loop of feeling inadequate and doing the inadequate things, to start noticing, oh, hey, this is that thought that I thought yesterday, and it led me to do this thing. And now I'm thinking that thought again. And that noticing in advance is what helps us have that moment of pause, to stop and think, and to notice in your head, oh, well, this is me thinking I'm new. And I know when I think I'm new, I do these things. And I don't claim the ideas that I'm creating in the workplace.
So Shelly, just to recap on what you've said, so basically, if we don't stop, think, and evaluate or reevaluate what we've said or thought, basically what happens is we are unable to, or we don't acknowledge, or we don't see or ask ourselves, is this a fact or is this a perception? And I like the fact that you ask your clients, would 100 people agree with you? So would 100 people agree that what you have just thought, is that a fact or is that a perception?
And 90% of the time, our brain will want to argue that it's a fact, but 90% of the time, it'll be a perception. It'll be a belief or an internal identification we have in ourselves even. And these might be very, very deep. And I'm going to talk about the deep ones in a little further on. But yes, that is what's going on, is we want to ask ourselves, do 100 people agree? Well, firstly, we want to ask, would 100 people agree? And then, do I want to agree with that? So here's where we get into the intentional thoughts. So we can actually ask ourselves, well, if I can see all these unintentional thoughts going on in my head that are creating these feelings that don't feel comfortable or don't create the motivating results that I want, what can I think? I bring fresh insights. I have different skills. My experience is valuable. I can see what's needed here. I have leadership skills. I'm strong in a lot of requirements. My time is now. Everything that is also 100 people might not agree, but that doesn't mean we don't get to choose it. I have leadership skills. 100 people may agree or may not agree if I have leadership skills. But when I choose to think that of myself, I create a different result out in the world. And the best part of working with clients is just letting them know they get to think different things about themselves. You all watching, listen to us interview and chat about this, you get to think different stuff.
Shelly, do you ask your clients to write down their intentional thoughts, or do you ask them to journal at all, and just so that they can reflect on what their beliefs are, or belief systems are at that point? What are the sort of strategies that you recommend for people to change their mindset and change their way of thinking around these intentional thoughts in particular, and actually to internalize them?
So Jodie, that's a great question. What I do with my clients is often, once we've looked at an unintentional situation, often they'll bring something that's happened, they want to break it down and see what happened, is we will create an intentional thought in the session with them, and we'll look at, well, what would play out. Or sometimes my clients will struggle with what they want to think. And I might ask, well, if your best friend was in this situation, what advice would you give them? How would you ask them how they could think? Or what would your mum say? Or what would your boss that you admire say? So just kind of getting their brain thinking of like, what are different ways to look at this situation? And you might come up with a few different options. Then you'll say, okay, well, of the 3 or 4 we've created here, which one gives you the feeling that you want to drive you forward? So it's looking at that intentional thought, so coming up with one, and then making sure that it matches to the feeling that you want. And then the actions are almost irrelevant, in the sense that as long as you've got your thought, you've got a feeling that it might feel good or genuine or caring or motivating or committed or dedicated, or, those are the best ones that come off the top of my head. Any of those will help you create a different result in the future. And then they'll take, as long as they can feel willing and able to think that thought, then they will get a better feeling, and not better, but they'll get a more suited feeling to the situation, and they'll be able to work through it. And we don't always have to have happy feelings. There might be times when we want to be sad, we want to grieve, or we want to feel angry and mad and, kind of explode at the world. Those are all valid feelings. We just want to make sure we choose them for the right situations, that's all. And often, now that you've got me going, Jodie, I'll keep going. These intentional thoughts might be a struggle to think at first. They might feel too far down the road. So we do what we call a bridge thought. It is possible. My experience is valuable. I am building strong leadership skills. I am strong in many of the requirements. Anything that I am creating, it is possible. I am working towards, I am figuring it out. We use that as a bridge thought, knowing that at some point that bridge thought will be less than the actual thought. I do have strong leadership skills. I am creating value in the world. And we just work through making sure that they have an intentional thought that serves them, and they feel capable of thinking that feels roughly true for them right now, true enough that they can continue to practice to think it, that it matches a feeling they want to feel, and it's going to drive the actions they want to take. So those are all the intentional thoughts, and it is so critical that we manage the thoughts in our brain to start creating the world we want to create and live in. And this is kind of where that systemic bias comes in. So there's so many people now are talking about the systemic bias in the organizations that we live in the way we interact with the world, even in like our social media apps, that they all have systemic bias built in. And it's there, and it's 100% true, and it is a fact, and people have proven it. And we can still make an impact on the world by managing our intentional thoughts. And there's one more piece to this, which I'm going to flip over to now, is that sometimes we have subconscious thoughts, like subconscious associations that you just can't push through. Like if you're feeling, I don't know why I'm scared to show up, but I'm just scared to show up. I don't know why I feel this way. And you've broken it down, you've like looked at 10 different things. You're like, I'm still just really scared to put myself out in the world. This is the stuff I've worked through myself, is then it's most likely a subconscious association. So this is something that you've created kind of before the age of 10 or 12. And we can still manage it and we can still break through it. We just come at it a different way. We don't do this conscious thought, intentional thought noticing. We do it through a variety of techniques. I have a hypnosis coach that I work with. She's been incredibly valuable to do all the work that is happened too young in my life to even know what's going on. But she's been able to release a lot of that fear that I've internalized. And my sense is that this kind of internalized fear happens a lot through generations. So if you're feeling like, I don't know why I'm just not allowed to do this, I can't give my permission to speak up, it's most likely subconscious stuff. It's totally workable, totally break apartable. It's just a different way. And I will recommend someone if you think you need that style as well. And I can help you with all your conscious thoughts. Now, let's talk. Questions?
Yes. Okay. So basically, let's discuss the difference between what a life coach does, like yourself, and somebody like a psychologist, for example. And so do you refer people to psychologists where you're not able to support them? And yeah, can you just talk people exactly through the differences between a psychologist and a life coach, and what exactly you can help them with as well?
Sure, that's a great question, Jody. So I'm going to tell you kind of how I see the differences, and then I'm going to tell you a story about my own life. So a life coach helps somebody look at the thoughts in their head kind of in a more from now onwards type way. So they work with them exactly where they are now, and there might be some back work, but it's more likely, okay, what result do you want to create in the future? And it's very much a results orientated by managing your brain and influencing your environment and showing up in a different way in the world. And as a psychologist, there's a specific piece of that where you go to a psychologist and you tell your story and they validate you and you feel seen and heard and validated. And their job isn't to question your thoughts. Their job is to help you make sense of something that happened in the past in a way that feels really powerful and validating and lets you release a lot of trauma and anxiety and fear. And if a life coach does that to something, and a good life coach and a good psychologist will be able to say, oh, this is what you need here and this is what you need here. My own experience of this is I went through postpartum anxiety. It was quite vicious. It was quite big. And it was undiagnosed for about 2 years. So the first 2 years, I didn't know what was going on in my head. And I was able to access counseling and psychology and take the appropriate medication because it was a chemical imbalance as well, to get myself kind of back to here, back to like basically able to turn up at work and basically able to do the job that I had already learned to do. And I was very good at it, but I could see that I wasn't here. So I used a lot of counseling, medication, psychology to get back to here. And they validated my story and they understood what was going on and they helped me lean into this new person of just being, not having all the fear of being a brand new mum. But I wanted to get back to here from my career and my own self-progression and advancement. And just, so I used coaching to go from here to here, because when I was in postpartum anxiety, I'd gotten into massive habits of all those unintentional thoughts. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not a great mom, I should be doing better, the house should be cleaner, I'm doing everything wrong, I'm a terrible person, because of that chemical imbalance. So even though counseling had got me back to here, I was able to use that intentional thought creation and noticing all those patterns and unwinding them one by one to get back to here. And there's a distinct place for both of them. I won't work with somebody that clearly needs counseling and psychology first until they're ready to say, until they feel validated and heard and seen, and they say, okay, now I'm ready to work on my thoughts, and then they'll come back to me. And also I have referred people back to counseling when they need it as well. And as for the subconscious piece, I can work with somebody with both their conscious thoughts, and they can work with somebody else with their subconscious thoughts. And it actually matches really well together for that piece as well.
I like how you've explained what you do so well in terms of you, so I'm summarizing and I'm just trying to make sense of what you've said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you are teaching people strategies and mechanisms for them to deal with their life as it happens right now, and teach them how to cope and to deal with situations and perhaps even individuals in their lives who they find challenging. Would you say that that is fair?
Yeah, for sure. I've worked with people that have struggled with getting with the individuals in their household just because they didn't know how to feel good about themselves. I've worked with individuals that are building up business, but they're struggling to show up in their business because they don't think, they haven't had the life history and background to build them up into these confident, capable, I'm allowed to do these things patterns. There's a big piece of my work that's often related to the relationship we have with pride. So for me, I didn't trust pride because of something that happened when I was a child. I thought pride meant that it's almost like the pride before the fall, right? Like if you feel proud of something, it's something bad is going to happen. But when you release that story and you let yourself feel pride in what you are and who you do and what you are, and I messed it up. When you let yourself feel pride, it's easier to go out and do the things because you're not scared of what might happen if you feel that emotion. Pride is one of the ones I call a signaling emotion.
Sure. And so basically what you're saying, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to validate ourselves before we can actually go into the world and actually become a catalyst in some way, or even catalyze change in our own lives. But without the self-validation, we are not able to move forward, or we're stuck in old patterns and old thought patterns, in basically self-flagellating thought patterns. Sometimes you spoke about perfectionism a little while ago. Yeah. And one of the great descriptions about perfectionism that I've read is that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it is a self-flagellating pattern because it's almost punishing for the self to be a perfectionist. And it's something that in society we're kind of taught that, hey, you know what, being perfectionist is a great thing because then you can accomplish so much and you can do so much. But you never really taught that it actually has a real downside, where it can lead to burnout, it can lead to depression, it can lead to a feeling of I'm not good enough because I'm not achieving, and I'm not achieving all of these things, and my life is supposed to follow this trajectory, and it's not. So people get caught up in that, and then they don't realize that you are chasing something that is illusory, and that is so elusive that it doesn't exist. So that is why it is elusive as well.
Yeah, and the reason I'm smiling and nodding so much right now, Jody, is because basically exactly what you described, this thought error, it's a sticky note on my laptop right now, because that's my most one of the big things I've worked through is this thought error of punishing myself leads to getting ahead. punishing myself, like making myself be more perfectionistic will lead to getting ahead. And it doesn't, because when we try to make ourselves be more perfect, it leads to guilt and shame. And guilt and shame never leads to the actions that actually get us ahead. And that's really so, there's a half dozen of them that come up time and time again for my clients. And that's one of them. I'm really glad you brought it up, that perfectionism, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, worrying too much, they never actually create the results we think they create. And it's not until we look at them one by one, when we get into them in the sessions and we help people see, hey, this isn't working for you. Even though your brain is trying to tell you this strategy works, it's actually not working for you. We call them thought errors.
Yes. And, having experienced burnout myself, I think that it's something that I feel really passionate speaking about, in terms of also encouraging women to look at burnout as not some badge of honor, but actually as something that is so damaging, because we've held ourselves to such a high standard, and it's actually not achievable, and it's not attainable to have these goals that are so lofty, they're unrealistic. So I think we've got to go back to the idea of SMART goals, and actually realize that we need to have goals that are actually measurable and that they are achievable. They're not just goals that we are going to set because society or our boss or the organization that we're working for sets for us, but actually that we can stand in our own conviction and say, listen, this is what I'm capable of. I know what I'm capable of, but I also know what my limits are. And though I have a voice, I'm going to choose to use it in a way that I feel is the best way for me to do that, and don't feel so obliged to use your voice or not use your voice because somebody else or an organization or whatever the case may be tells you to or not to do.
I love to play with the words. Well, if it's the concept of achievable and accomplishable. So you talked about your results feeling achievable. Do they also feel accomplishable? And for me, there's a smidge of difference in those two words. So it might feel achievable, but does it feel like I can accomplish it? Do I even want to accomplish it in that time frame? And I've been playing myself with just slowing down, and like I'm my own boss, so I don't have somebody telling me what I need to do every day. So that's me. But I've been encouraging myself to slow down, and I've been encouraging my clients to actually slow down, and they get more done, and the quality of the work is better when they slow down, and because they bring ease back into their life, and they bring ease back in there. And that might be as simple as ordering takeout instead of having to cook dinner every night of the week. But just that ease flows through the entire household, and it makes everything feel better.
Yeah, I was speaking to one of our speakers yesterday, and she was speaking about ease as well, and we were talking about the links between disease, and it always makes me think about the word disease in general and how it means dis-ease. And literally, we invite, not always intentionally, obviously, but because there is uneasiness in ourselves, that actually does lead to physical symptoms and to physical manifestations where our immune systems are lowered, and we could get sick because we are putting ourselves under so much stress. And I don't think people realize until sometimes it's too late what kind of stress our immune system goes under when we are in overdrive. I mean, to the point where I experienced adrenal burnout, where my kidneys, my adrenal glands were barely functioning because they had literally burnt out, because I was constantly on this treadmill and just go, go, go. And that was all I knew.
And sometimes we don't know how to get help or where to get help for this stuff. And sometimes we think it's about taking more medications, and really it's about just letting our brain stop.
And the scary thing was that it was so insidious that I didn't even realize what was happening or I mean, at times I was so sick. I didn't know I was sick. For instance, I had a kidney infection and I didn't even realize that I was very ill, to the point where when I did go to the doctor, the doctor said to me, "You should have been admitted to hospital." And you just kind of think, well, this feeling becomes normal, where you're just constantly, well, I've just got to push through it. And it is
Mm.
not normal. It is not okay. And I think that we, just as people, need to realize that we live in a society where, yes, it is very driven and we want to achieve, or achieve things that perhaps aren't necessarily, as you've already mentioned, Shirley, they aren't necessarily achievable. And I like the distinction that you've made between achievable and actually being something that you're able to accomplish. And I think that's an important question to ask yourself. Am I actually able to accomplish this realistically?
Mm. And then the question to tack on to the end of that is, how can this be easy? Because so often we want to complicate things. I'm number one complicator. If you ask me a question, I'll tell you the answer in like 30,000 words. But that's the challenge, is how can this just be easy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, socially, do you have a preference for people that you work with, or what are you really passionate about tackling? Do you like working with people from the business world? Is that something that you're really passionate about? Do you like working with, entrepreneurs? Could you tell us a bit more about the kind of clientele that you work with?
Yeah, I can. So I'm a general life coach, which means I can coach anybody on anything. And that's my passion, is to have somebody come to me with all the things and get coached. And I love people that come to me with all the things. Maybe they have some things happening in their life they need help with, and they have a passion. They have like a big goal, or they have a skill that they want to grow and put out in the world, so that they come to me with all the stuff and kind of like a big mess of life, which is totally normal. As whole humans, we all have a big mess of life sometimes. Sometimes it's more, sometimes less. But they always have this kind of guiding light, or this North Star at the end. And there's always something that they're working towards. So I love working with people that have that guiding light or North Star. Maybe it's an entrepreneur business they're building, or they have a creative skill, or they have a goal, or they want to write a book, whatever it is. But having said that, I will still work with somebody to find what that is for them as well.
And so at the moment, are you accepting clients online? Are you seeing people in person? What is your sort of strategy, or going forward, your plan with, with COVID restrictions changing all the time? Are you happy to speak with people? And I'm sure you have been speaking with people online, but do you practice online consultations as well?
Yes. So everything I do is online, which is very fortunate because I'm lucky to live in Whistler in a ski resort. Often my clients will call and I say, oh, there's snow outside. So I do everything online. It's all over Zoom. It's face to face, so I can see your face and hear your, get your cues as well as your voice. I have free consultations that I offer people. We do a very thorough, in-depth talk about them and their life and what's going on and what they want help with. And then if it's a good fit, I make an offer on that consultation to work with me, and we work through the brain. Immediately often just goes, no, I can't do that. This is new. This is different. And we just work through that process of, this is what you want. Let's help your brain feel safe to say yes. And then that happens in that initial free consultation. And then we work together for 12 sessions of in-depth coaching. And then I give them support throughout the week. And then after those 12 sessions, I've coached them through some big stuff in their life. They've got a pretty solid grasp of how to manage their brain, and they will have that skill for the rest of their life. It's like learning to ride a bike inside your head. And you can go out and tackle anything in the world with these tools that I teach my clients.
And so during the 12 weeks of coaching, are people able to send you videos and messages and say, hey, Shelly, I need some help with this, or can you just remind me of this? Is that, how you work as well?
Yeah, kind of. So some weeks I'll go without, but at the end of every session, they always get a call recap email, which is exactly, keeps them on track for the week. It tells them what we coached on. It teaches that principle that we talked about. Maybe that was, not hating on themselves, or maybe that was celebrating their accomplishments, or maybe that was like seeing the value of this. And then I'll encourage them throughout the week to focus on one thing, or send me a catch up, check in with me. And sometimes they'll go the whole week and they won't need or want to check in. And sometimes I'll get a couple of emails that I'll reply back to. And then we jump straight in on the following call and say, hey, how did your last week go? How did you go managing your brain? And we celebrate whatever they've accomplished throughout the week as well.
That's awesome. Shelly, so let's talk a bit about people who are currently experiencing bias in their lives, whatever that bias may be. What advice can you offer them? And I know it's difficult to give generalized advice, but if you could just give them a few pointers or just some coping skills or mechanisms that they could perhaps refer to, contact you about, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so I think some of the questions we've talked about throughout this call of would 100 people agree? And having that moment of pause and asking yourself, do I want to agree with what that person said? And being able to kind of name the feeling. And maybe you won't know the thought. Maybe somebody will say something and you'll just have a reaction, or you'll want to have a reaction, but you'll hold it in because we are conditioned to be good, not respond and not be out there, not have outbursts. But just naming the feeling is very, very helpful. I feel angry. And it doesn't matter if you have to go into the bathroom and say it out loud to yourself in the mirror in the bathroom stall, like, I feel angry. They said that. I thought something and I feel angry. And tagging in that middle piece of they said and I thought, you don't have to know the thought yet, just is, and I thought something in my head and I feel angry, or I feel overlooked, or I feel overwhelmed. Just naming the feeling, and then if you can, finding the thought is very helpful. If you can't, just naming the feeling will help you kind of become more aware of what's happening in your brain. And when you build up that skill of what's happening in your brain, and you can always reach out to me for help with this too, you'll start to create a different way of showing up in the workplace. And it won't happen immediately. It's not like you're going to come in and people are going to be like, whoa, who's this new person? It'll happen just gradually enough that people are a little more comfortable with that. If like you feel like you're hitting up some of those stereotypical or systemic biases as well. And then asking that question of how can this be easy? Sometimes just lets our brain calm down and lets the cells see that we're overcomplicating things. How can this just be easy? Like my question right now is, how can it just be easy to feel better? And the answer to that is just name the feeling you're feeling right now and be okay with feeling that feeling for as long as you need to. And I have a whole nother thing about feelings I didn't really even touch on. Feelings are just vibrations in your body, and they are safe and they're okay to have, and they are valid.
And that's really great advice, and I think very useful and definitely, simple enough to incorporate and to remember, actually. So thank you for that, Shelly. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure people who are listening to this talk will as well. So I have seen that you've obviously shared your contact details here. You prefer people to reach you via email, right?
Either is good. I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, and they can reach me via email.
Yeah.
You can link my Facebook up, I'm sure. And whichever method is just comfortable to you. I love talking to people on Facebook Messenger. I love jumping in and seeing my LinkedIn messages, although honestly, some of them are spam. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have. That's why I'm laughing so hard, because we've all got those spam messages. And if you're just a person that just likes to shoot off an email, Shelly Bortolotto. It's a married-in name. It's not, maybe the one I would have chosen, but I chose the boy. So you can reach me at shellybortolotto@gmail.com. Follow me on LinkedIn, find me on Facebook, and I would love to connect with you.
Awesome. And what I'll do is I will also share all your details on the posts that I share so that they are available to people as well. Shelly, I'd like to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your time and I really appreciate your advice and sharing with us the wonderful knowledge that you've just imparted and being so willing to share as well. And not to mention being a part of this initiative, being here for the conversation of breaking the bias, whatever way, shape, or form that bias takes in our lives. So, Shelly, much appreciation to you. I look forward to connecting with you in future.